Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Lady Freethinker Activists in Action interview series. I'm Nina Jackel. I'm founder of Lady Freethinker, a nonprofit media organization dedicated to exposing and stopping the suffering of animals, humans, and the planet. Today, we are thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with Marc Abraham, or Marc the Vet as they call him. Marc is a veterinary surgeon, author, and animal welfare campaigner based in Brighton, England, who's involved with a variety of animal rights and activism efforts. Marc, before we get started, did I miss anything, or would you like to share a bit more on your background?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on your show. I think you ticked all the main boxes. So, veterinarian, animal welfare campaigner, author, I guess founder of Pup Aid and Lucy's Law, and also I'm the co-founder of a group in Parliament here called the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Dog Welfare, which discusses dog issues and makes progress with legislation with regard to greyhound racing, puppy mills. Even last night we had an event in Westminster about dog fighting, animal cruelty and the link to domestic violence. So we cover lots of different subjects. And anyone's invited.
Well, that's terrific. Well, thank you for your insight. It sounds like you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
A lot of us know you best for your campaign to pass Lucy's Law in the UK, which was a tremendous success. What initially drove you to start that campaign?
The Lucy's Law campaign actually began 10 years ago next month. So in May 2009, I saw some puppies coming into my vet clinic dying of a disease called parvovirus, which is quite a common disease picked up from puppy mills. And I did a bit of research to where these puppies were purchased from. And it was a local licensed puppy dealer who was buying them in from a local, from a licensed legal puppy mill, which was in Wales, so a few hundred miles away. And it struck me as horrific, really, because these puppies were obviously dying of this disease, and there was zero accountability for the person who bred them. And I thought this was a bit well, it's obviously very cruel, but it was out of order. And I didn't really know about law or politics or history or any of the subjects you need to go into changing the law, for example. So I just started campaigning by putting on a dog show called Pup Aid, which was celebrities judging the dogs. A fun dog show like Waggiest Tail and Child's Best Friend, not like a posh championship dog show. And because I use celebrities of different demographics, the media would pick up the story in different sort of news outlets. So the posh newspapers or the tabloids, depending on whose celebrity, would interest their readers. And that progressed, moved it to London, and it became quite a big dog show with about 10,000 people attending last year, wow. Including people like Ricky Gervais, Peter Egan, soap stars, reality stars, all sorts of different celebrities and well-known personalities. So it that's all I knew. That's all I could do in terms of raising awareness. And the message that I was getting out there was obviously never buy a puppy unless you see it with its mum and the place it was born, or better still, go to a rescue shelter and adopt. So it was very simple messaging. And it was only really when I was asked to go to one of our, so MPs are the same as your legislators, senators?
Yeah, senators, congressmen, yeah, congress people.
Okay, Congress. So I was invited to a congresswoman's house to advise her family about what dog to get, and we decided on a rescue dog, and they got a rescue lab. And she in return said, I'd like to help you with your campaign, come to Westminster and we can see how I can help you. And I went to Westminster, and I used the analogy of that scene in Gladiator when the slaves first go into the Colosseum and they're looking all around like, right. What is this place? And that was me going to Westminster for the first time, and that was my introduction to politics. And then 300 odd visits later, we actually managed to change the law. So it's been quite a journey. At least, yeah. And having a full-time job as well.
Wow.
And not living in London. So it's been quite a challenge, but it's been, it's been phenomenal.
Wow. So it was a 10-year journey.
Yeah.
What do you think ultimately got Lucy's Law passed? After 10 years, what finally got that actually in movement?
Over the line. Well, for the last 8.5 years, it's really been a campaign to ban the commercial sales of puppies without their mums. So from third-party dealers, from pet stores, from anywhere that isn't the breeder.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit of a mouthful. And although we made a lot of progress, and I say we because it was me and some other campaigners all doing it in their spare time. So Linda and Sue from Cariad, Julia Carr, Sarah Clover, Andrew Penman, Beverly Cuddy, all doing it in our spare time with very, very limited or no resources.
Yeah.
And we geographically live very, very far from each other in the UK, which I appreciate isn't that far for American distances, but UK distances is. And we would speak on email every day, maybe 50 emails a day between us all, writing reports, getting the strategy ready. And it came to a point where we were up against, and we'll talk about this in terms of the difficulties, but we were up against some of the biggest animal welfare organisations in the UK.
Wow.
We were up against the pet industry, and we were also, of course, up against the government because we were trying to change the law. And when you're up against the might of those organisations and money and power and influence, and you're 5 or 6 campaigners in your spare time with no money, you have to think a little bit more creatively than otherwise.
Absolutely.
So a dog called, a lovely little dog called Lucy, who was a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, was rescued about 8 or 9 years ago now from a puppy mill, licensed, again, legal puppy mill. Most people don't realize that puppy mills are, on the whole, legal. Same in the US. And she was rescued and rehabilitated by a girl called Lisa. Sadly, Lucy only lasted 3 years in freedom. She succumbed to her injuries and her illnesses. She had epilepsy and dry eye and separation anxiety and all sorts of things wrong with her, crippled with arthritis from being in a puppy mill. She passed away December 2016, and I just thought, how do you penetrate this fortress of power with what we've got? And I remember saying to Lisa, Lucy's owner, after a few months, I said, I'd like to personalize the campaign and call it Lucy's Law. And it became a very powerful way of weaponizing a campaign in the nicest possible way. It sounds quite brutal, but by calling something Lucy's Law, or anything with a name and her little face on the logo, it was incredibly divisive, and it was a way of separating who genuinely supported it from who genuinely didn't or wasn't prepared to yet. Because basically they were refusing to support it, but that wasn't a phrase that they liked to hear. So this beautiful little amazing dog whose face was looking out of the logo had already captured the hearts of thousands of people. So she had about 74,000 likes on Facebook. Because she met celebrities, and she was used in the nicest possible way to promote rescue and to promote puppy farm awareness. So I spoke to Lisa, and all of a sudden we had this ready-made army of 70,000 likes on Facebook, all calling for Lucy's Law. We had celebrities already on board, as I said, people like Ricky Gervais and Brian May and Peter Egan, Victoria Stilwell.
Yeah.
We had all the charities in the UK, all the medium to small charities, because the big ones weren't supporting. And we had the power of the public. Everyone was calling for Lucy's Law. So what got us over the line in the end was definitely little Lucy. And it's sad that she was never here to see what she achieved. But it was the fact that we had come up with a brand, if you like, that was very, very hard to ignore. It was incredibly popular. For example, we did an e-petition last year, which you need 100,000 to be debated in Parliament. So we which is a lot. And I did one a few years ago, and it took me 6 months. But we did one last year, and it took 13 days to get 100,000 signatures. Such was the power of Lucy's Law. And of course, when you've got that that amazing response from the public. It's very difficult. And we had, I think, 150 MPs on board. I'd obviously been to Westminster over 300 times. I had fantastic relationships with the MPs, and all of a sudden you have this ambush almost on the government in the nicest possible way of the public, celebrities, MPs, most of the charities. We had a big newspaper as a media partner as well. So it was almost like, well, they've got to act at some point, because otherwise they're looking bad. And of course, all these MPs are wanting to be re-elected at some point. It was good for them to be seen, whatever their motives are, to be seen supporting Lucy's Law. Most of them meant it. I'm not sure if all of them did, but we didn't care. And all of a sudden, you have this power of the mob. And then at the same time as these big organisations and the pet industry were talking with the government to kind of block what we were doing, I was in the equivalent of your Oval Office, convincing the special advisors, the directors of legislation, the heads of policy inside number 10, so inside the equivalent of your White House, that the campaigners were right and the big organizations who were trying to block us were wrong. And that forced what's called a call for evidence, so a public consultation, which came back 75% in favor of Lucy's Law. So from then we knew that we were on the, I guess, the last winning bit. And then it was announced in August 2018. So last summer we had a garden party in the equivalent of the garden of the White House. And it was announced, and then it was confirmed in December, and it comes in later this spring. It's been there's so many twists and turns in that journey, as you can imagine. I mean, so many obstructions, blockages, nastiness behind the scenes, disingenuous behavior from these big organizations that appear public facing to care, but on the inside are actually doing everything possible to stop you succeeding, because it maybe affects vested interests, or maybe they don't want a shortage of dogs because then the rescue shelters will be empty. So there's all sorts of I would call it corruption behind the scenes. But we battled on, and it was a big game of chess, really. And every time we got blocked, or a piece was taken, if you like, we'd rethink, and we'd take our time and lots of deep breaths and not get too upset. And then we'd make another move, and slowly but surely we won the game. But no words can sort of describe how hard it was and how rewarding it is now to know that we've made such a big difference for the future of dogs and cats, not just in this country, but I think it's gonna affect worldwide animal welfare.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's amazing that you were able to do that with a true grassroots effort and get to that level to where you're actually changing a law, a national law. That's absolutely incredible. So do you know how Lucy's Law will affect dogs and cats in the UK once it goes into effect?
Yeah, so it's going to come in to what's called secondary legislation. So it joins into legislation that's already existing, and it's tweaked for licensing. And it means that you will have to have the mum present when you're selling a dog or a cat, a puppy or a kitten. And if the puppy or the kitten's mum isn't there, then it can be reported, flagged to the local authorities, to the police, to trading standards, to the council, some of the big charities maybe, and it can be investigated. Because at the end of the day, you cannot legitimize an activity which is third-party selling, so selling via a dealer, because the puppy or kitten is already damaged before it reaches the seller. So no matter of how you improve a pet store or improve someone's premises, obviously nowadays there's less pet stores selling. There's more people selling from their houses or from their garages. You cannot improve that environment enough to take away the suffering and the cruelty involved with the transportation, with the separation from the mum, from the cruelty inflicted on the hidden mums behind closed doors, which the public never see. So it's impossible to license that activity. So you have to ban it. So it makes every single person selling a puppy or a kitten completely accountable. So if there's a problem, we know who it is. So they're less likely, obviously, to make problems. It's harder to run a puppy mill if the public are there. looking at the mums.
Absolutely.
Almost, I would say, impossible.
Yeah.
And you know, we had so much, can I say, crap thrown
Of
at us.
course. Say whatever you want. Yes.
From all these people trying to block us. You know, oh, they'll just bring out a fake mum, but the seller is still accountable. And it's quite easy to spot a fake mum because she fears the real mum coming back and she doesn't interact. But the seller remains accountable. And also you can actually prosecute retrospectively using DNA analysis. It's quite easy, and it costs £20.
Really? Oh.
You've also got, you know, oh, it will go, you'll force it underground if you ban it. Well, that means, A, then don't ban anything, right? Because it'll just go underground.
Right.
And also, puppy smuggling is a big deal in Europe. And yes, it is underground. However, when those puppies need to be sold, it's very, very much overground, because there's an urgency to sell them before they stop being cute. They have to be detectable by the British public, the sellers. And that means they can be detectable and traced by law enforcement agencies, local authorities. So the underground argument didn't work either. We've had the supply, the supply and the demand, there won't be enough dogs. Okay, so by banning third-party sales, which are the distributors, they're not the producers, the only puppies they distribute, of course, are the cheap, sick, dying puppy mill pups.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're removing that market. So what these organizations are saying is we need those to supply the demand, which again is wrong.
Yeah.
So every time, and even one organization even said it'll be dog theft will go up because there won't be enough dogs. So there'll be, and that's when we knew we were winning, because they were coming back with so many crazy arguments.
That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, how many dogs are in shelters?
More and more ridiculous. But it's as I say, it's been a journey. There's still a lot of these organizations. We had a debate the other day, puppy smuggling debate, and a lot of these organizations are still trying to tell MPs that we're wrong and and continuing with their own agendas. And I get leaked everything because of my relationships with all the congressmen. And I just look at them and go, you really can't take the fact that you've lost. Your organization has been embarrassed by a bunch of campaigners, and your vested interest or whatever you're protecting by trying to block what we were doing is now under threat. And that, you know, it shouldn't be like that. And I would always say, just be very careful where you donate money to these days. I know a lot of the human organizations have all been, you know, undone, and these huge salaries that they take. You know, some of the local rescues, and I will promote, if I'm allowed to, these guys, Finding Shelter, which is in America. So look them up. They're an amazing charity based in Philadelphia, and they do puppy mill rescue. Very, very dear friends of mine. They are, again, grassroots campaigners and charities that are just doing what's needed for the dogs. They live and breathe for the dogs. They don't go home at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. and take, forget about dogs for the weekend. They are 24/7 people. And I'm lucky enough to know and work and campaign with so many like-minded people like that in this country and now in the States and other places too, that prioritize animal welfare to a point where that is all that matters. Not money, not pensions, not big cars or big houses. It's making sure that the future of these animals is protected.
Yeah.
And it's I'm very honored to know all these people and work alongside them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it sounds like a long journey, and you've learned a lot along the way. For the average person who wants to do what you've done and pass stronger animal protections, whether it's at the local level or the federal level, how would you recommend that they start?
Well, I think the most important thing to realize is that anyone can make a difference, right? So there's no point getting angry at social media, which we all do, because we are, and I especially get sent and tagged into so much cruelty stuff. Yeah. There's always something we can do. Now there's campaigns 24/7, SeaWorld, puppy mills, bullfighting, dog fighting. I mean, dolphin captivity in the cove in Japan.
Yeah.
There's some phenomenal campaigns that are trying so hard with often limited resources to tackle and end all this cruelty. And it's often the most vulnerable, mostly animals. I guess we're exposed to that more because people send us and tag us in stuff.
Yeah.
But there's the first thing people can do is just follow the accounts that are trying to stop it and share their posts on social media. It takes a second. You can do it sitting on the loo. But
Yeah.
it requires, my point is, it requires almost zero effort. Share. Follow accounts that you admire, that inspire you, that are actively doing something useful. And of course, you could potentially step it up and maybe look for petitions that need signing. Petitions work. They work in many ways. They can either get a debate in Westminster, like our ones, or some of them, like the Change.orgs or the Care2s, are brilliant sort of portable sharing ways of raising awareness and obviously getting numbers. But they are so easy to share these days. Again, read the petition, sign it, and more importantly, share it, because they really make a difference. It could, I could share a petition now, and it could inspire someone maybe in New Zealand to start a campaign, or to then share it with their friends and family. The social media reach we have now and the internet reach we have now is mental. There's no excuse not to share. So take it a step further, you could start your own petition. Maybe there's something you feel strongly about. Start your own petition, see how you get on. You'll no doubt attract other people that are maybe thinking about the same thing. Come up with a hashtag that's unique and catchy, and that other people can maybe engage with. I think if you really want to start your own campaign, which I completely advise if you feel strongly about something, keep it simple. Keep the mission statement maybe one line, 2 max. Meet senators, congressmen to gauge the sort of level of interest. Often animal welfare is way down the list. If you sell it in as something that's going to make them look good, that could be the only way in to actually get you further up the ladder. Always be polite to people. My rule is never ever engage with trolls or negativity, but instead pour positive stuff on the good people, because that not only ignores the bad guys, but it makes them less relevant. Trolls and negative people just want to look relevant, and I don't even block people, because it makes them know that I've spent 0.1 of a second of my life actually being bothered about them. Right? So ignoring is really strong. It's also a lot less stressful to just ignore and just pour positive praise on the good guys, and collaborate with like-minded people. And my campaign, I definitely no way could have done what I've done on my own. When I went into Parliament, into Westminster, I had a report that Julia had written at 3 a.m. the night before. It was based on evidence that Sue and Linda had collated from another campaign. It was approved by Sarah, who's an attorney, a barrister, and put in that language. So it was, and then there was a newspaper article from Andrew based on the stuff that we'd sent him, and then Beverly Cuddy was a magazine editor. So again, another magazine. So everything you do, and if you can collaborate as much as possible with people who are good at what they do, and pool your resources and keep talking, and every time you strike, make it worthwhile. And every time someone strikes back to you, never ever react, because that's what people are expecting. And a lot of the stuff, even now, we are getting is almost to try and tease us out of our hole and react on social media. And as soon as you react, it's game over, because as soon as you enter dialogue, you will never win, because the last thing they'll need to say is, see, told you, you haven't got any comeback on that. So be very, very careful in engaging, and being very careful in who you enter dialogue with. And if you can, and if you're really bothered by something that people are saying to you online, take it offline. Either go for an email chat, or or a direct message chat, or maybe meet in person, but never ever go negative, because you look as bad as they do. Yeah. So there's lots of things you can do, but I think my golden rule is everyone can do something, and start small, share stuff, comment on stuff. And then you can, watch other campaigns. And if you think you've got something that is worthy of campaigning about, which I'm pretty sure everyone has, either join a campaign that already exists or start your own. And we did the dog show as well. The dog show was the first way we campaigned. So it was a way of raising awareness. We did rallies outside Westminster with the traditional sort of placards and loudspeaker. That works. It works because all these things that you do, especially in public, dog shows, rallies, going to Westminster, I used to take a picture outside Westminster every time and tweet it saying I'm here for meetings. Not who I was meeting, not why I was meeting, but here for meetings. And it makes people think, oh, who's he meeting? Why? Which part of Westminster? I was usually number 10 by this point. But it tells your followers, if you've got a campaign that has followers, that you're actively campaigning. And never ever worry about flooding your timeline with the fact that you're doing campaign work, because when people are invested in campaigning in your campaign, they want to see it actually living and breathing. And the more you do, the more they're invested in your campaign. The harder you work, the harder they'll support. And get celebrities on board. You cannot underestimate the power of celebrity. We've been so lucky to have Ricky Gervais as our kind of biggest influencer in the UK, who is actually the biggest influencer in the UK, has been for years. And then you've got, actors like, and animal welfare campaigners, our mutual friend, Mr. Peter Egan from Downton Abbey.
That's right, yes.
Victoria Stilwell, and we have huge stars on this side. But the relationship building that goes on behind the scenes with these big influencing celebrities is probably, and MPs, congressmen, is probably the most time consuming of everything. And it's the stuff that people don't see. And it takes hours to send the same email tweaked to 200 congressmen in one day, or to send 200 tweets to exactly the same MPs saying exactly the same thing, and tagging in all their local newspapers and all their hashtag local constituencies. And the more work you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And there's no shortcuts. But good luck.
Well, that's a gold mine of information right there. So thank you for all of those tips.
And just don't give up. Never compromise and never give up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another thing, sorry to interrupt. Another thing is, the more you campaign, especially on your own campaign, the more you learn about what needs to be done, who's involved, whether it's celebrities, congressmen, or whatever. And I always say it's like, in something like Homeland or 24, when there's like a terrorist or a killer, and they burst in that room at the back of the house, and on the back wall there's a string, and there's newspaper clippings, and there's post-it notes, and there's all these like crazy stuff linked together. That is the brain of a campaigner. And the more you progress with your campaign, the bigger that is on the wall. So you can never stop your own campaign, because you can't ever expect anyone else to understand what that crazy stuff is, because it's in there. Because it's quotes from debates, it's comments that people have made, it's the names of pets of congressmen, right? And you have this all in here. When you email a congressman, you go, "Dear so-and-so, how's Jake, your Jack Russell?"
That's smart. I love that.
It's that level of tweaking that will often make the biggest difference, because you're personalizing everything. There's no point saying, dear member of parliament, forget it. So it's the time taken, it's getting that wall of craziness with all the string attached, and the more you do, the bigger that gets, and the less likely you are to sort of stop your campaign, because no one else is going to take over from you. So just keep going, don't compromise, and if it's winnable, you'll win. And my last piece of advice is, if you can, speak to an attorney before you start if you're trying to change the law. A lot of stuff you can achieve by raising awareness, sometimes as effective, if not more effective, than changing a law. If it's a law you want to change, then speak to an attorney. That in this country, we're lucky because there's an organization called Lawyers for Animal Welfare who offer pro bono advice. So you can actually speak to them for free. And if you are trying to change the law, find out if it's actually possible to change that law. So there's no point doing all this And then at the end they go, oh, well, you can't do that because you've wasted your time and everyone else's time and 10 years of your life. But if you have access to a free attorney, then make sure you can actually, there's a law to be changed, and then work towards that.
Yeah, no, that's also good advice. And we do have a similar attorney service here for specifically for animal rights. So, so it's possible. Yeah.
Is it ALDF? No, is it?
No, but they do similar things too. There's actually one that I use, and I can't remember their name right now, but it's it's a group of attorneys, and they have a foundation, and they specifically work with animal rights organizations.
So it's like gold dust. And always just thank, if someone helps you, whether they like an influencer or a celebrity or a congressman, if they publicly share something or say something or support you, always thank them. And that thanks can be anything from a tweet, from an email, to a bottle of champagne, to or a dog treat for their dog. But always thank people, because it's the one thing, then they'll do it again. So many people are asking these big influencers to help, which sometimes they do, and they are never thanked for it. And it annoys me, because it's just respect at the end of the day. But if you want these big guys to keep helping you, keep rewarding good behavior, a bit like positive dog training.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's fantastic stuff right there. A lot of great tips. So now moving on, beyond legislation and activism. I mean, you've traveled the world to actually get on the ground and help save animals.
Yeah.
So what have been some of your most memorable experiences out on the field?
There are a lot. My most memorable has to be helping out in Thailand straight after the tsunami in 2004. I came off a night shift at my emergency clinic, and we had the news on, and we saw what was going on. And I just thought, obviously the attention was about the humans, fair enough. I just thought, what's the state of the animals over there? So I literally booked a flight to Thailand and just flew there, and arrived where there was lots of bodies and buildings floating in the sea, and joined up with the charity, and ended up treating animals for shock, rounding them up, putting them in the Buddhist temples, which were the only buildings still standing because they were marble. A lot of the dogs and cats were so confused because they'd run to the hills because of the earthquake and the tsunami, and then they'd come back and they didn't know what was going on, and they were standing where their houses were, but it was flat, waiting for their owners to come back. So we were rounding them up. I was there for about 6 weeks, and we went to PP and Khao Lak and a lot of the villages that weren't in the media spotlight. So they were sort of more locals had been killed, and they weren't getting the attention that the big resorts were receiving. Right. And then I came back. It was a very, very strange experience, and came back. And then it hit me when I got back, because I live on the seaside down in Brighton, an hour from London. And I couldn't work out why there weren't bodies floating in the sea, or the buildings weren't all wiped out. It was very weird. It was like a delayed shock, because I think when you're there, you're so immersed in it. And then I raised, I think, £1,000 and went back the next year and gave it directly to the charity, because there was rumours of corruption with the government. So that was kind of my saddest, really memorable trip. I've also worked in the slums of Mumbai for a phenomenal charity called Welfare of Stray Dogs India. I've rescued a dancing bear in the Ukraine with 4 paws. The charity 4 paws, not so the bear had 4 paws. Right. I did puppy mill rescue in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania with shelter.
That's notorious, that area for the puppy mill.
And interestingly, that day we rescued a cockapoo called Pippa and a German Shepherd called Victoria, named after Victoria Stilwell, because Victoria Stilwell was with me, Grace from the charity, and Peter Egan. Victoria, of course, the German Shepherd, was so poorly, but lived another 18 or so months. She only passed away last month.
Really?
And she's given rise to Victoria's law, similar to Lucy's law, which is to ban puppies, kittens from pet stores.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's another personalized campaign. So if your listeners, viewers, Google Victoria's law, Philadelphia, they'll see that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that will inspire them to do campaigning in their own states.
Yeah.
California, where you're based, of course, is one of the leaders in the states with forward-thinking, early adopting, banning stuff that isn't right. And, you know, I was in LA many, many years ago and saw pet stores with puppies. Then I went again a few years later. They were all gone and replaced by groomers, replaced by doggy daycare. I remember one in LA, and I went in and there was a board, and it was a load of dogs' names with dates next to it. And I was like, what is that? Oh, that's when they're coming in for their birthday parties. And there was a puppy playroom with looked like a glitter ball. And they had doggy discos, non-anesthetic teeth cleaning, all these alternatives, you know, of revenue streams because of getting rid of the puppies. And it was obviously more loyalty and longevity for their business plan. And I was also told, which I loved, which was that it was becoming socially unacceptable to walk around with a pedigreed dog puppy. And everyone was going to shelters.
Absolutely.
And in a few years, the city of LA had completely switched and flipped. And that was really inspirational for me with regard to campaigning, because I thought, if you guys can do it in a city like LA, which is a big deal, of course, then anyone can really do it. And so that was interesting. I've operated on a moon bear, which are these poor bears that are used for bile extraction in China, with a charity called Animals Asia. Amazing charity in Chengdu. I've neutered dogs in the Amazon.
The Amazon.
So in a place called Iquitos in the Peruvian Amazon, which is the biggest town/city in the world that you can't reach by car, because so you can only get there by plane or river because it's on the Amazon. And I just came back from India a few weeks ago, where I've been working on a sanctuary called the Animal Aid Unlimited Sanctuary that specializes in rescuing street dogs and cows from the streets, in which I did a lot of surgery, a lot of shelter medicine, school visits, and out on the streets, on the Indian streets with the ambulance. And then I went to Agra, and I spent a day with Wildlife SOS on their elephant sanctuary and their sloth bear dancing bear sanctuary. So I tell you something, I'm never happier than being abroad and either working or watching what other people are doing to help animals around the world. You know, Animal Aid Unlimited, one of the most incredible places I've ever visited. Wildlife SOS, they managed to stop dancing bears. They stopped it in India. So all these little pockets of campaigning are going around the world with people that are, again, prioritizing animal welfare. These aren't rich charities at all. These are charities that are surviving on a shoestring. They're using social media to help their fundraising, and they're getting the job done. And they're making there's that classic quote, which is, it makes it for that animal, saving a dog won't change the world, but for that animal, for that dog, you've changed the whole world. And it's true, and that's kind of the motto wherever you go. It's small wins, and doing as much as you can with the resources available. And a lot of these charities are very similar to campaigns, really, because they're just doing everything they possibly can to improve the lives of as many animals as possible. And I just that inspires and excites me the most when you see it done for the right reasons, the passion in other people. I've also sort of described this sometimes as when you meet other campaigners, and even when I met you in Brighton when you came over recently, when you're with like-minded people who maybe don't eat animals or are interested in campaigning and are interested in other campaigners and their stories, it's almost like counseling, because you've got nothing to prove. There's not going to be an argument. There's no confrontation. You're not going to be trolled, but you are with someone that gets it. And when you're with someone that gets it, your shoulders drop, you start remembering how to smile again, and you can actually really enjoy people's company who you don't really know. Which people watching, if you are a campaigner, you'll get, or if you're an animal lover, you'll get. But it's when you are a campaigner and you put your head above the parapet. Someone told me once, the bigger target you make yourself, the more likely you are to get hit. And when you live your life like that, to find pockets of like-minded people who you don't know, because obviously it's different with friends that you've known for years, but who you don't know, like you. What's the first thing we did? We had a nice walk, and then we hung out, and it was almost like we'd known each other for years.
It was
the most natural thing, because there was so many, in terms of like a Venn diagram, there was so much overlap in our sort of shared interests, animal welfare really, that everything else kind of just slotted into place. And when you're around like-minded campaigners, unpaid voluntary campaigners, I find it like counselling, because you can actually share stuff, be yourself, have fun, and often make progress without really even trying, just by coming together and just enjoying each other's company. So the campaigning thing is a fascinating sort of world, and I would definitely encourage anyone who's thinking about it to just give it a try, because it could be for you. It really could be for you, and you will be helping the most vulnerable. And it's worth pointing out, this isn't just about animal welfare, although that's our priority, but this is about helping the most vulnerable. And you may want to help disabled people, you may want to help old people. There's always something that can be done, and if you find something that really excites you and interests you, and you feel that you can make a difference, then just do it. If you don't like it, don't do it, but it's definitely worth giving it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Great stuff there. Thanks for sharing so much with us and with our viewers. And I just have 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
And the first is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced as an animal advocate?
Biggest challenges, I think personally, first of all, you don't know what you're going into. I started treating sick puppies in my clinic, then I did a dog show, then I started to go political with absolutely no background in politics or law, and ended up changing the law, right? This is, I mean, it's still crazy. I still can't actually believe it's happened, but it did, and I need to accept it at some point. But maybe I don't want to. Maybe I quite like feeling that it's still a dream. So personally, it was incredibly hard, because I was working full time as a veterinarian. So everything is in your spare time. Every weekend, most evenings till 3 a.m. Okay, so that's it. It's very time consuming. Because you are working these unsociable hours as the campaigner, it's incredibly lonely. It can be very depressing. It's very frustrating. You know what needs to happen, but you can't quite do it yet. But at some point it has to happen. 10 years later, but that was hard, stressful. It's keeping the momentum going, keeping you energized, not giving up, and that's why it's important to have your fellow campaigners around you, people who do it on their own. I genuinely don't know how they do it, how they keep motivated. Have your gang campaigning with you. Meet up regularly, because otherwise you kind of forget what a campaigner looks like. I mean, I'm lucky in Brighton because it's fairly close to London. I can attend events in Westminster. I can be around other campaigners, but it's difficult. We had a few that were out miles away that didn't come into London, and you could hear when you spoke to them how hard it was to keep motivated. Julia, who wrote our reports, she worked full time and had a family, so she was doing all her work from 3 till 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And I'd wake up, going to Westminster, open my email, there's a 28-page report, print, off I go. And it was that for years we did that. So that's personally, that's definitely the hardest thing. It's keeping going. You do get what we call scraps from the table occasionally when you're hanging out with Ricky Gervais, or you're going to a Queen concert as a VIP with Brian May.
Oh wow. So
there is a small percentage of the 100% of campaigning that is unbelievably positive, and it's it's amazing, and they are now friends of mine, and which is again mind-blowing. not name dropping, but it's just yeah, it's nice because they're your idols, and you've come together with a shared animal welfare. And when you meet them and you're hanging out with them, it's as if you're just on the same page, which is amazing. I would say, with regard to my campaigning, as I've mentioned already, discovering that certain organizations that are telling the public that they care and that they're kind and that they're full of empathy and compassion are actually doing the opposite behind the scenes and actually trying to block stuff. That's hard for two reasons. One is because you've grown up with some of these brands, knowing that they are like amazing. They are saving animals, helping animals, rescuing animals. But when you've discovered it, to try and tell the public what they're up to is almost impossible, because no one believes you. You know, we've got, it's like telling the public that Santa Claus doesn't exist, but 4 of them at once. So you have to almost go through the media and get the media titles to expose them, because then obviously it's an endorsed by media title. That was the hardest. It was finding out that certain organizations that claim to be sort of animal welfare organizations are actually blocking what we were doing behind the scenes for presumably vested interests, and they couldn't find any reasons that were evidence-based why they were behaving in that way. And I think the last 18 months of the campaign wasn't campaigning against puppy mills anymore. It was actually campaigning against some of these big organizations, which is crazy.
That's
and
very disturbing. Actually, I find that very disturbing, because
it was really disturbing. And when you tell people, no one believes you. And why would they? But it was true, and they did, and we overcame them. We outmaneuvered them. We were more creative, and little Lucy, bless her little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel heart, beat a lot of them.
Good for her.
For sure.
Power to Lucy. Yeah.
Power to Lucy. That dog. I said to Lisa, her owner, when I approached her to say, can we call the campaign Lucy's Law? I said, if this comes off, your dog will be the dog that changes the world. Yeah. Without a doubt. And she was like, okay, let's do it. And it's happened. It's happening. Yeah. And yeah, little Lucy, amazing dog. And for all you listeners or readers or whatever, subscribers, viewers, check it out. Lucy the Rescue Cavalier. Check out her page. When this goes online, I'm sure it'll be shared by Lisa. But it's an amazing story that you can look at the backstory of little Lucy and see all the celebrities that she met and the dog shows she attended and how much awareness she raised. And when she passed away, it was quite suddenly over a weekend, the outpouring of grief was just worldwide. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of comments. So to get an idea of how much love there is out there for pets, not that we need to prove it in any way, but when she passed away, it was quite a unique outpouring of grief. But check her page out, Lucy the Rescue Cavalier.
Yeah. I'll post that on the website too.
Yeah, just an amazing way. Again, we're talking about how to raise awareness and how to do a campaign. That is using your pet as a Facebook celebrity or Instagram celebrity, drawing people in with your values, which with Lucy we're raising puppy mill awareness and rescue dogs. And then, of course, your people are emotionally invested in your brand, if you like, sounding all marketing. But people love what you do, and then they'll share what you do. And the more you do, the more they share. And again, you can do it for free. It's fun. It does take time. Lisa amazingly responded to every single comment, whether it was a like or actual comment back. That's an idea of how much work was going into this campaign to make it successful. So yeah, it's huge campaigning, and it can be as big as you want it to be. But again, allow yourself to be led, because someone like myself, I had no idea what I was doing. As a young kid, I was collecting caterpillars and drawing them and then putting them back on the leaf. That was the extent of my social life.
Yeah.
And now with Lucy's Law in England, soon to be in Wales, and hopefully in Scotland, it's like just managing countries and parliaments. But it's a fascinating and incredibly privileged position to be in. Yeah. And it wouldn't have happened without my team around me, without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, I think you're a really good example of how dedication gets results. You know, even if you're not the most experienced, you know, if you really want something to happen and you have the perseverance that you have, you can be successful, and the right people, obviously, too. But it's inspirational. It's inspirational to me. I know it'll be inspirational to everyone watching, too. And it's great to hear these behind the scenes tips and see exactly how you did it, because it's an incredible thing.
I'll tell you one little funny story. When I started to go to Westminster, I was aware that there was a congressman who was quite influential. So he knew the minister, so the big decision maker. His area where he was the MP for had a lot of puppy mills. However, he was notorious for being a fox hunter. Okay. And into blood sport, right? Yeah. This is quite a nice little lesson. But now I was and still am an animal welfare campaigner, obviously against fox hunting and against blood sports. He was very, very pro blood sports, and everybody knew him for that. So I engaged with him. We had coffee. It caused a lot of raised eyebrows in Parliament, seeing both of us sitting together.
Yeah.
We talked about our differences, maybe even joked about how we would never be aligned on those fox hunting issues. However, he was a big dog lover, and he not only said, I will help you because this is dogs and we can put our differences aside, and he was actually one of the most influential congressmen, senators I worked with in the campaign.
Really?
He said, yeah, and it turned out we had an hour and a half together in our first meeting. He was actually quite a charm. I know it sounds mental, and just bear with me on this one. Very charming, very intelligent, but incredibly influential. We put our differences aside and we worked together. We met the minister together. We were emailing each other, and he said, "You will win this by attrition," and I'll never forget that. And it's true. Attrition is how you win campaigns. You just keep on going and you wear down every single wall that's put in front of you. And if someone is like a fox hunter and is like totally on the different page, and you can still find common ground, then use that common ground. And the other thing is, it softens them a little bit that they're actually helping another animal, in my view. And it means that you're building a bridge that you can potentially use later on. So don't just, even a lot of congressmen or MPs in this country have backstories that you may not approve of or may not agree with, but concentrate on your campaign, remain focused, and use them in the nicest possible way to get what you need from your campaign. And almost put your blinkers on and just ignore the other stuff if you can. But I did, and it really, I could have ignored him because I thought, he's into fox hunting, but he was incredibly charming, a very, very nice guy, and easily one of the most influential legislators that we had on our team. So there's a lesson in there somewhere. Don't always take people for what they are. Use them in the nicest possible way. Don't exploit people, but use them for your campaign, because sometimes they may be the only people that can unlock that particular level. Which she was.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and I think in the States you could apply that to maybe the opposite political party, because a lot of people associate animal welfare with one party, but don't block out the other party just because.
Always make political campaigning. You call it bipartisan, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we call it cross-party.
Oh, okay.
So the more cross-party support you get, the stronger your campaign is. Yeah, it's always encouraged to me to make sure it's cross-party, and it always has been, because animal welfare is, of course, across all parties.
Absolutely.
But it's essential that you make it cross-party. And at the end, we had so many Conservatives, loads of Labour, the SNP, the Scottish Party, We had a few DUP from Northern Ireland, and we had Caroline Lucas, who's the only Green MP. So we had every party. And yeah, as I said earlier, whatever people's motives are, just get them on board. And the more names you have, the more uncomfortable it is for people that aren't included, because they'll go, oh, I need to get on this. And you kind of make this sort of cool club, if you like. Hang on a minute, Ricky Gervais is supporting those guys over there. Why aren't I involved? And it just draws them in. And it can take someone like Ricky, or it can take any huge celebrity or influencer, and people go, oh, hang on, I want a bit of that for whatever reason. And then you go, fine. And the more inclusive you are, and Lucy's Law, I loved Lucy's Law for its inclusivity. No one owned it. I came up with the idea, but that was it. Everyone was invited, from celebrities to the public, to charities, to MPs, to congressmen. Everyone owned it. The people owned it, because the dogs owned it, really, and the people owned it for them. So being as inclusive as possible, and the power of the mob, I hate that expression, but it's true. The power of the mob is very hard to ignore. And in our case, it really helped.
Yeah. Great. Well, fantastic stuff. For my last question, I'm just curious, what's in store for Marc Abraham moving forward? And yeah, what do you have going on? What are your plans for the future?
I'm in the middle of writing a book.
Oh.
I've learned so much in the last few years with regard to changing the law, raising awareness, campaigning. I want other people to have the access and to almost have the shortcuts to what they can do. So chapter by chapter, it will be all the tools that are available, free mainly, to either raise awareness or change the law, or both, for the most vulnerable. So not just animal welfare, but every chapter will have almost like a case study about Lucy's Law, about how we applied that. And I want it to help. God, it's hard not to sound like a bit of a prick, but to change the world, to improve lives of the most vulnerable. I've done it the hard way, and I want other people to feel like they can achieve something, if not the same, if not more, using the tools that are out there. Because at the end of the day, there's no excuse for not doing anything. And the more you do, the more personally rewarding it can be. But even more than that, the more change you can make for animals, elderly, disabled people, the most vulnerable. And there's so much nastiness in the world at the moment. I think the more positive stuff you can do and share and pass on and inspire, encourage in others, it's going to be just a happier place to live, and a bit more a kinder place and a compassionate place. And some of these real old-fashioned values seem to be sort of being lost in consumerism and commercialization and corporatization. So it's a very old school approach, but I genuinely think everyone can do something. Yeah. So I'm writing a book, and I run my group in Westminster, which is forcing change and enabling change and facilitating people to come together and positively change stuff for dogs mainly, and writing blogs and all the rest of it. But I'd like to open a veterinary clinic at some point. But there's just so much other stuff going on that I feel is my call. Again, it sounds very cliche, but I feel it's my calling. I'm good at it. I enjoy it. So I want to keep doing it if it helps others, or if it helps people trying to campaign, or if it helps animals directly. So I'm just going to carry on and just do what I do. And people like yourselves, like Lady Freethinker, that enable messages to be shared, across the world in this instance. And I think the more people that, like yourself, that just go, do you know what? Let's hear his story and talk about it and share it. Then it's like that pyramid selling, isn't it? It's that influencing others. And I don't know. It just excites me more than anything. Is changing stuff to help the most vulnerable. In this case, animals.
Yeah. No, you have so much to offer. What's the best way for people to follow your work?
Easy. So my name is Marc with a C. So my website is marcthevet.com. marcthevet.com, or follow me on Twitter, which is Marc the Vet, marcthevet. And I have a Facebook page, which is Marc the Vet, again with a C. And yeah, I tweet quite a lot, as most of my followers will groan and agree. Pupaid is my campaign, really, the umbrella campaign, PUPAID, and that's also on Twitter and Facebook. I haven't done it. I haven't embraced Instagram yet because it's just another thing, and I just haven't got the time. If I do something, I want to do it properly, and I'm not a believer in cross pollinating different platforms with the same message, because all the languages are different. I'd rather do Twitter, and for campaigning, Twitter, there's nothing that beats Twitter in my opinion for campaigning. So those are the ways to get hold of me and see what I'm about. You'll maybe experience some, as well as some silly jokes, some football information, some soccer information, sorry. But on the whole, it's very animal campaigning focused. And by all means, get involved, share stuff with me. And if I can share stuff and help you, then of course I will.
Okay. Well, great. Marc, we'd like to thank you for sharing your time with us today. We love everything that you're doing and look forward to continuing to follow your journey. For those watching, thank you for checking out Lady Freethinker's first video in our Activists in Action series. For more information on our organization, please visit ladyfreethinker.org. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lady Freethinker. We'll also be posting Marc's information so you can get hold of him. And thank you for watching.